Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, weekly podcast where the team members from that nerdy site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me once again this week, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's going on is we are once again in a spoiler cast-free week here
Oh,
after our big, long, almost 3-hour epic last week with Brandon Gann for Final Fantasy 16. We've not had a chance to just completely burn through a big old other project since then. I guess we probably could have gone and seen Mission Impossible Part 1 or whatever, but we didn't.
I've never seen any of the Mission Impossible movies, so I would have been totally lost.
It would be an interesting perspective for you to come in 7 movies in specifically for a part 1.
Yeah, that'd be really weird.
But yeah, I've only seen like probably half of them myself. But yeah, I know the gist. It's Mission Impossible. He takes a mission that is going to save the world, and if it goes bad, he gets disavowed. So there you go. Spoilers
And
for that whole franchise.
and the song goes da 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 da.
Yep. Been going. I mean, the Tom Cruise one's been going on since like the 90s.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff. Yes, we are going to be talking today instead about Exoprimal, which Cameron has been playing. I continued my Final Fantasy train rolling and went back to the Pixel remasters and finished Final Fantasy V. And then Cameron has been playing Commonhood as well. Is that a Game Pass game?
Yep, Game Pass game came out this week.
There you go. So yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about. So if any of those are of interest to you, you can find the timestamps in the description below. But prior to that, if you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast everywhere you can, all that fun stuff. So Cam, tell me about Exoprimal. All I really know about this is it's like 5v5 dinos that then turns into like PvE against dino stuff that then turns into PvP at the end. Is that pretty much the gist of the game?
Kind of. It's still way more focused on PvE.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, the setup is you have 5 people who are playing on each team, and you're basically trying to complete the waves as you move around the map.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to complete waves faster than the other team.
Yeah, I mean, like my very like not focused, not paying attention kind of like what has like seeped into my brain is like, oh, it seems kind of like Gambit mode from Destiny 2.
Definitely feels a lot like Gambit mode. You're encountering with like the whole mechanics are PvE focused. And essentially once you get to the very end, you get to there's 2 modes, PvE pure and then PvP mode. PvE pure, you then get into like a speed run basically of that first one until you complete it, which is way less interesting. The PvP one is more interesting. Each side has to roll a payload to a point where both payloads meet in the middle, and whoever can get theirs fast enough, starts an upload period. But basically, both teams will normally get to the end point at pretty similar points. At which point, I mean, at any point really during the PvP end game, you can like traverse the map over to the other team and attack them. Like that can happen at any point. And your cube that your data cube that you're trying to push forward, has an HP bar on it that can be restored if you have enough people around it to reboot it, basically. But if it's destroyed, it won't move at all. Like you can't move it forward. And so, at that point, you try to eliminate other exosuits as you're trying to take it on. You're also dealing with just like a plethora of dinosaurs coming out of these portals that are just attacking you constantly. So you're trying to balance PvE elements with PvP. It's very similar to the Gambit mode, but I would say that what makes it more unique and interesting is it would definitely have to be the different exosuits and kind of what they bring to the table. I don't think that there's a bad exosuit that I've encountered. There's one that's very jack of all, like kind of well-rounded with that it is a more soldier type exosuit that is kind of the default one. And it kind of breaks down from there. Like it's not like no exosuit is similar enough to another one that I would say any of them are like useless or pointless. They each bring strength. They're broken out, of course, into your 3 basic setups. tank, DPS, and support. The support ones are pretty interesting because they are like there's a variety of ways that their support is implemented. There's the Witch Doctor that can throw down area of effect heals within a certain range. There is the like a Valkyrie one which throws direct heals onto individual people. There's another one, Nimbus, that can bounce between doing like drone support basically with either as attacks or heals. The tanks are broken up between one that can generate like a big Reinhardt shield from Overwatch type thing, but also uses like gauntlet fists to like throw hands for damage. There's one that is like this massive sentinel that can deploy like a dome shield over your team, but also at the same time has like a massive Gatling gun. And then the third one is focused on deflecting attacks with a giant sword. So you deflect attacks and gain damage, like and gain focus from enemies and stuff, and then do massive amounts of like physical damage. DPS is ranged between your standard kind of soldier shooter, well balanced. There is a Zephyr, which is kind of your close range combat. Feels very roguish, two swords, dashing in, dashing out type stuff. There's Barrage, which is my personal favorite, which is a agile explosives focused one where you're focusing on either launching grenades at people or planting landmines that then do like thermite damage. Every class has every exosuit has a overdrive, which is like a super ability. Barrage is my favorite because basically you do a pseudo kamikaze run where basically you light up on fire, charge towards an enemy, you cause a massive explosion, sends yourself backwards, and like it's awesome. I've taken out an entire team with it once in PvP mode, and it was awesome as all hell. Because there's like an overpass that I climbed up and sort of went around them a little bit, jumped off, like did my overdrive, jumped off, and then just collided into their data cube, destroyed their data cube, and destroyed like their entire team, except for like one or two guys who weren't on the data cube at the time. So super awesome. Also, there's a thing where if you get to a certain point, like say you're behind, or if you're not the behind team towards the end, you can basically one of your team members can hop over and do a direct attack on the enemy team as a massive dinosaur. So either as a Triceratops or a massive T-Rex, and you just go in there and you just wreck house on their team. And so oftentimes I save my overdrive for when the enemy team does that. But if somebody else took out use their overdrive for it, I'll save mine and then use it on the enemy team at the end. It's super cool. It's very fun. I'd say its biggest weakness is that the replayability for I put in several hours this weekend on it. I'm level across the spectrum on it. I'm well into the double digits now on levels. I've played probably like 15, 16 games.
What do the levels get you?
I unlock different things, abilities.
There are abilities.
Oh, sorry, not abilities. Sorry, like customizations.
Like stuff?
There's like some upgrades and stuff like that you can unlock, and that unlocks as you level up and stuff like that. I did one where I maxed out my ammo on my Barrage, like his grenades on his main weapon. I maxed out that. Like, there's different things to upgrade and kind of customize your class a little bit to your exosuit to be particular to like how you favor to play it. And that makes leveling up the suit themselves worth it in a lot of ways. But I don't know if this game has the legs on it really to shake it up enough if this is all the kind of matches are. Mm-hmm. There's a story going on, but the story is unlocked as you complete it. It reminds me a lot of Titanfall 1 and how that story came through, where you played different matches and then you got like story unlocked after you won a match. That's very much the same way here. It's cool, and it's a very interesting way of kind of like approaching story for a PV, a more gameplay focused game. And the story is interesting enough. Basically, the world is dealing with like these incursions from dinosaurs from these temporal portals that like people don't know too much about like what details are. There's this massive AI that was behind it, and like behind this whole thing called Leviathan that is secluded on this island that has a barrier in front of it. Your team gets kind of like is on a patrol around that island, and they end up on an impact that causes a crash landing onto the island. Leviathan seems to be stuck in like a war games mode where it takes exosuit pilots that it thinks are really good pits them against each other in these war games that it was conducting when this satellite fell onto the island and caused this malfunction and caused the entire island to be like basically a massive amounts of dinosaurs to just pour out of portals and end up massacring the entire island population, basically. And so you're trying to like piece together the mystery of everything that happened with it, while also at the same time keeping your team alive by essentially keeping resources coming in for your team. So when the goal is to repair your jet, like your carrier plane, to then get out of this place. But in order to do that, you have to make sure that you're like going and participating in these matches, or as Leviathan's going to like launch dinosaurs on your team, basically holding them hostage. And so it's this whole thing. You have like it's pretty interesting, and it's like enough to keep you going, but at the same time, it's just not. There's not a lot of substance there. I think there's a lot of flavor. I think there's a lot of flair to it, and it's a lot of fun. But unless you are like super into this game, I don't see it having legs in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a perfect Game Pass game.
Yeah, is it? I assume you've only been playing with like randoms. You haven't like teamed up with like a squad or something.
I don't know anybody else who's playing. Everyone else is playing like only Up or other games right now.
Gotcha.
Or they're like at Disneyland, or like it's summer. Everybody's everywhere.
I was gonna say like Blessing is the person I think of that has been like most excited for Exoprimal, but yeah, he's out. He was out at Disney this weekend. So,
and our other friends who would be interested in this stuff are busy with other stuff too. Yeah. So like this is just probably not going to be it. I think it's still a really cool game. I think that it's the baseline for some really cool stuff, and I hope Capcom doesn't give up on it. I think that it still has a lot of potential.
Mm-hmm.
It's just for its first outing, it's solid enough. I would say this is probably like a 4 out of 5 still, like as far as like it is, but it is a 4 out of 5 that it is what it is. Like it is exactly what it is. It is. There's nothing else of substance there. There's nothing deeper about it. It is just what it is. But what it is an excellent version of that.
Is there like a roadmap for like different game modes? And the only other thing I can think of about this game is I know they've teased like other Capcom tie-ins, like Street Fighter, suits, like exosuits or skins or whatever.
I'm sure there is a roadmap for it. This definitely feels like one of those games that it's like, hey, we're giving you some very basic stuff now,
mm-hmm.
and it'll build up over the years. It reminds me a lot of kind of like when a Monster Hunter releases and launches. There's always that promise of like more stuff coming down the line. But I just don't know, like, outside of like Googling it right now, I have no idea what's coming up on it.
Yeah, that's fair. Hearing you talk about it, the other thing that comes to mind for me is the Gundam game that you got into for like a week last year, and then bounced.
I was on it for longer than a week, but I'm sure it felt like that.
It felt like a week. So is this the same kind of thing of like, as soon as something new comes along, you're kind of like, or are you already kind of in the place where you're ready to bounce off this to something new, something else?
If I had like, they have a whole season going on right now of stuff.
I guess like Diablo 4 season of whatever starts next week. Are you more inclined to go to Diablo, or are you going to stick with Exoprimal?
Here's the thing, I'd probably
or neither.
Maybe neither. If I go back to anything, it would be Exoprimal. I'm really not interested in starting a brand new character out for a seasonal run. That's very Diablo's seasonal stuff is really cool for people who are into it, but it's not me.
Mm-hmm.
And I found the story, especially the ending, be lackluster enough that I have zero interest of going back and replaying it.
Okay, then I guess other option to throw in that mix. Are you going to go back to like Final Fantasy mode of Final Fantasy 16?
I might.
Yeah.
Like I would say there's a good chance of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
I also might just like find myself in like right now I'm looking for something that lets me build.
So that will segue into your other game that we're going to talk about later, I guess.
So I'm really more into that, and we'll get more into that. But I have not found what I'm looking for right now. I've not found my July game just yet.
Gotcha. Because are your plans? I guess what is on the calendar next for you? Like, what's the next game coming out that has you like excited? Is it Baldur's Gate? next month.
Yeah, I think it's Baldur's Gate probably would be the biggest one for me. Is like that August release. I'm really looking at being tied over till August.
Yeah, and you are enough of a PC player that you're going to jump on to that on Steam.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas I just pre-ordered it from PlayStation, so I'll be like a month behind you, but whatever.
Yeah, when it comes to like upcoming stuff, I don't see myself into anything just yet. I'm trying to think of like upcoming stuff, but I'm kind of like not thinking of anything that comes up. I think Sea of Stars
Yeah.
might be the like another next thing for me is because everybody like that looks really cool, and you were really high on the demo. So
Yeah, it's a game I backed a ways back. So yeah, I have a copy of that coming my way. It's definitely one I've been keeping an eye on. Like I don't go deep in the Discord stuff, but I'm in there. I see them doing updates and stuff like that. Like that, I would say that's out there. Oxenfree 2 just came out. Is on my like, oh, I should like check that out because I was a huge fan of the first Oxenfree game.
I will say, Story of Seasons: Friends of Mineral Town came to Game Pass.
Oh, did it?
Soul Hackers 2 is still on Game Pass. I haven't touched that yet. And then I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I have been tempted to do a second playthrough of Star Citizen Sleeper, but I might not do that just because I don't want to like, I don't know. That's one of those games that it's like a matter of like the playthrough I got is the story that I participated with, and I don't know if a second playthrough would like sully that at all. Like because now I know what to expect out of it, and I know what the outcomes are of stuff. Like, am I ruining that for myself? So there's that aspect of it. On top of that, also I might just hop into Oxenfree 1. I've never played it before. I've owned it for forever. That was always going to be like I'll do a let's play for that. And that we're talking literally back with Naughty Gamers, like back when I still called it Naughty Gamers. Like I've had Oxenfree since then. It's literally installed on my computer. I probably should just play it. It's been highly recommended by people to me. So
yeah, it was in that like era of games like Your Life is Strange that I think started doing Telltale games better than Telltale does. Or Telltale did before they were unceremoniously shuttered,
and then revived in a weird way.
Yeah, the weird zombie corpse that's coming back with whatever Telltale games coming out this year. Yeah,
Tales from the Borderlands 2 or whatever it is.
Was that no? That wasn't Telltale. That was Gearbox.
Was that still Gearbox?
They just went and made that one themselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's the one they have coming out. I think like this month is based on one of those shows that I don't. The Expanse. There we go. A show I am unfamiliar with, so I will not care at all.
I have some friends who are really into that.
Yeah.
Snowback Mike and Washburn are two people I know are super into the Expanse. So
there you go. Yeah, I mean, I would be curious your thoughts on Oxenfree. That's a game I 100%ed on like Xbox when it originally came out, and then when it came to PlayStation, a year or two later, I like picked it up, platinumed it on PlayStation. Yeah, it's a like I don't typically do like horror kind of thing. It is a horror game, but it's like in large part because of its art style, and it's got a few jump scary kind of things in there, but it's much more like unsettling horror. It's definitely not like violent horror kind of thing. So
so not my kind of. I'm joking.
Yeah.
That was a topic about what were we watching that we talked about?
That was Spider-Man 2.
Spider-Man 2, yeah.
When we were talking about that on that D Plus show.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you find something. I picked up like Story Seasons Friends of Mineral Town back when it came to Switch, I think.
Oh gosh, I still have it on Switch. I never touched it.
Yeah. But now it's on Xbox Game Pass and you can just play it there. Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, talking about playing older games though.
Yeah, speaking of older games, I jumped into or like went back to because I started it. So I started going through like the Final Fantasies, the Pixel remasters earlier in the year, and I made it through like 1 through 4, and I started playing 5, and then other things started coming out. So I kind of put those on hold, but I've been going through and like getting the platinums for all those. Thank Christ for the great people over at like the Steam forums that put together great like guides, because there are a lot of missable things in these games, and the trophies are like find every treasure chest, find every hidden item, find every blah 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 in the games. So having those guides to kind of work through, even though I'm very familiar with many of these games, is like a great, like, oh, I totally would have spaced and forgotten that. Or like, I guess bestiaries is like the big one of like, hey, if I go through an area too quickly, I didn't find and kill all of the enemies, so I didn't unlock all the bestiary entries. And so those are good kind of like touch points.
I would rather starve to death than do that. That sounds miserable.
I'm enjoying it. I'm having a time, especially because it's like a, hey, I'm also seeing everything the game has to offer kind of thing.
I guess that's fair.
And
just the idea of like, ever open every treasure chest in a Final Fantasy game, gag.
Yeah. The bigger thing for me on like more modern ones would be I did not do when they did the Final Fantasy X remaster and made it like the super hardcore Japanese. You've got to kill like all of the, all of the like super deadly summons kind of thing to, unlock all the ultimate weapons. I did not do that because I like, even getting to like every character to level 99, it's still like you got to do very specific things to not die in some of those fights, and I just was not interested in that. I did do the goddamn 300 lightning bolts on the Thunder Plains though in Final Fantasy X, so suck it.
You did that, but you didn't do the battle one?
Yep.
Wow, that must have been painful.
It's because like doing the battle one is just so much grinding that like there aren't ways to necessarily like cheese some of those super deadly boss fights. So yeah, I just was not having fun with that. Because it's also like you have to like there are trophies for like in Final Fantasy X for unlocking and killing all of the super monsters in the monster like thing that you can do of like, okay, find all of the all the wolf characters, and then once you do that, you unlock like a super wolf battle kind of thing. Like having to do all of those and all of those super fights, not a good time for me. Final Fantasy V though is probably the most interesting of this batch of pixel remasters for me, because it is a game I've probably only played through once. I played like my Final Fantasy or my PlayStation version that is up there on a shelf. Back when it came to PlayStation 1 as part of like the Final Fantasy anthology series, I believe it was 5 and 6 that came out together.
I believe so, yes.
And that was my first time playing it because that was the first time it came to the West. And that like as great as as much as I appreciate those PlayStation versions, they weren't great versions of these games because
no, they weren't.
The disc meant there was a lot of extra loading that wasn't on cartridges and stuff like that. So I didn't have like the best of memories of Final Fantasy V, and I probably I think what it was, I think I had started to play it like back when I originally got that. And then it was around the time of Final Fantasy 12 when that came out. I set myself out to do like a full playthrough of all the games thus far, and so that was probably the time prior to this I had actually beaten Final Fantasy V. So that was 15 some odd years ago, something like that. I did not remember most of this game, so getting to dive in and play it with kind of like fresh eyes. Interesting, especially also right on the heels of Final Fantasy 16. So innately, I'm like comparing story beats and moments and stuff like that. Job system's a ton of fun. Great. Yeah, go ahead, Cam.
Oh, I just had a couple questions for you. So like, first things first, I mean, what did you think of the overall story though?
Yeah, like I enjoy it. It's very interesting. Again, like the order that these games are played in for me, there are a lot of things in that game where it's like, oh, because I hadn't played that, a lot of the things I love about Final Fantasy VI are because they felt so novel to me and stuff like that. Like I also jumped in and have continued my Pixel Remaster playthrough and just hit the World of Ruin in Final Fantasy VI. And I remember like one of the reasons I love that game, and it was my favorite game of all time for the longest time, was I thought it was so novel that like the bad guy wins halfway through the game and like destroys the world. And I think if I had played Final Fantasy V first, and you get like flavors of X-Death doing that.
A little bit, yeah.
It probably wouldn't have felt as meaningful to me when Kefka does it.
Interesting. Okay.
Because like it's especially like it's an interesting element, and obviously spoilers for 20-25 year old games and stuff like that, but God, 30 years probably. um I'm old. But yeah, like the fact that like you start in kind of like one world and then you go to another world, and then ultimately you find out that those worlds used to be one, and
Hmm.
they've separated, and and X-Death basically merges them back together, and then throws chunks of the world into a void. It's like, oh yeah, there are places I just can't go to anymore because X-Death wiped them off the map, quite literally. Um,
It makes
uh,
it interesting, isn't it? Comparing Kefka being like a god to and like doing massive destruction to the world to X Death be like in his own way becoming a god, but like an eldritch type god where
yeah.
he like merges the world and says, I'm gonna pick like, oh, Bartz, I hate you.
Hmm.
I'm taking your hometown and I'm throwing it in the void.
Yeah.
Like that's such a wild
Like,
moment
yeah,
when
a
he does that.
little bit of spite.
Yeah.
Um,
X also I think yeah, keep going. So yeah, tell me more.
it's like I will say, I mean, the comparison there, like X-Death and Kefka, I think Kefka still has infinitely more characterization
Absolutely.
than X-Death.
Absolutely it
X-Death
does.
is very like feels more like the earlier Final Fantasy bosses of like there isn't a, like he's more of like an archetype than a character.
Hmm.
He is just kind of like cool armor design kind of thing, but he's basically like he doesn't have like a personal relationship with any of your
Nope.
characters in it. He is just like mad and wants to resort and like return the world to the far past kind of void. And he
Hmm.
like the fact that like 30 years ago in the timeline of the game, warriors from that other world trapped him and imprisoned him on your world, and then bounced away. It's like, what a dick move from that other world. But the Warriors of Dawn, it was like an interesting element to the mix. It's also interesting playing this, I think, so closely and so freshly, following like Final Fantasy 3, because there's a lot of the same kind of like job mechanics between those two
Hmm.
games. And like, okay, you get to a checkpoint and now you've unlocked a handful of new jobs. There are definitely a lot of jobs I was like, I'm only like equipping this job to max it out for a trophy kind of thing. I'm never using these abilities. But there were a few that like came in handy a few like specific times. Like there's one fight where it's like, oh, it was really helpful to have a bard that could just cast a song every turn that like basically casts stop on enemies. Um, so
Yeah, so a couple of questions I had. So
yeah.
Exdeath is much less of like you mentioned lack of personality. He's very much from like he's born from curses. Like he's much more of a natural byproduct of the world
Hmm.
than like an actual true like antagonistic villain. Like there is like he's evil, of course, and ends up developing a personality and being spiteful and stuff, but it's far less of a like Kefka or even a like Golbez, um, and more like a chaos, I would say,
Yeah.
in that aspect, like
Yeah. Very much.
something an existential force being the main villain, which is something that,
Hmm.
especially coming off the heels of Final Fantasy 16. We'll get into spoilers on that, but there is like an interesting flavor to that, right? Like, I found it interesting that you ended up going back and playing 5 right away. I was like, that's gonna be an interesting thing to kind of like put together with that. Because also like the relationships between all the characters, your main party,
Hmm.
is like oddly very platonic. There's very much not a like there's doesn't ever seem to be a focus on like romantic sort of
Yeah,
interests.
there are a few scenes that you can get where like again, spoilers for that game, where Bartz finds out Ferris is a woman,
Yeah.
and not like, because she is presented very much initially as like a pirate, like very masculine pirate kind of thing, and it's like, oh no, she is a woman, she just kind of like very tomboyish. um and there are a few moments where like Bart's has like hearts popping up over his head on seeing Ferris. And I was like, at first I was like, oh, these still feel very Final Fantasy 3-esque kind of generic. Hey, especially because like there is the job system and you can make these characters whatever you want them to be. Um, but it is like realizing that Ferris is actually Lena's sister and like they're like the lost princess kind of thing. Bart still feels like very much like an outsider to
He
that,
is.
to the whole thing. Like Lena and Ferris like makes sense for this to be a journey of theirs because you know their kingdom basically like took care of the wind crystal. Bart's just kind of like an adventurer who kind of gets swept up in the whole thing.
One of
And
my
then
favorite things is that he actually tries not to get involved. One of my favorite things about Bart is like he actually tries not to get it, but it's Boko that forces him into it.
mm-hmm.
And I love that aspect of Bart's. Bart's is, but you're right, Bart's is an outsider. He's always an outsider, even in his own, like, you go back to his hometown,
Mm-hmm.
and even his hometown, he still feel like, and it's not like he's like, oh, I'm the outsider. Oh, like,
It's it's especially now interesting going straight back into Final Fantasy VI because like we find out later in the game that he's such an outsider because he is a child of both worlds.
yeah,
His dad, we find out his dad was one of the Warriors of Dawn from that sealed Exdeath away 30 years ago, and then like his dad was the other one that was like, hey, it's kind of a dick move that we're gonna just leave this here for these people, so I'm gonna stick around. He falls in love,
has a kid, and everything.
And that kid grows up to be Bart's, and so it does like tie him into everything. But for like a good chunk of the game, like the first 2/3 of the game, basically, it's like Bart's is just kind of like this extra guy along for the journey.
Yeah, because Galuf ends up being like this amnesic king from the other world.
Yeah,
Krile
and
is
another one of the Warriors of Dawn.
And then Kryle's his daughter, and she picks up granddaughter. You're right.
Yeah.
And then she picks up his mantle right away, and
Yeah.
it's like, okay. And then Bart just feels like he's still such an outsider, but he, like, at the same time, that's one of the things I love about Bart is that he is just an adventurer.
Mm-hmm.
Like these people, like, it's funny. It's like a character from a different RPG kind of gets caught up in a Final Fantasy story almost.
Yeah.
But yeah, he, like, you're right. He is a child of both worlds. He never really has fit in anywhere. And he's honestly just prefers just to see the world. Like he just is, he has wanderlust as part of his heart. And it's one of the reasons why the Wind Crystal chooses him.
Mm-hmm.
Which I love. I love that each of the 4 warriors of light ends up like being like having a different crystal connection based on their personalities. But yeah, I love Bart's as a very non-typical Final Fantasy type hero.
So that doesn't really happen in 5. Like they like the crystal shatters and picks pretty much all of them. Apart from I don't think Ferris has joined the party kind of initially in that like
no, sorry,
thing.
It's not. So but it's like something about him embodying the Wind Crystal or something. I don't know.
No, it's because it like the Lena's castle and whatnot there, she's out there like searching for her dad because her dad's trying to take care of the Wind Crystal. It shatters, and then they just go on a journey trying to like find each of the other crystals and pretty much get there right in time to see it shatter.
Mm-hmm.
And each one shatters into the jobs that like you pick up. But
I'm also coming back for, like, I haven't played this game in forever.
Right, you are. I think you're more pulling from like Final Fantasy 2, I think
I might be
is where that was drawing from.
I honestly I might be on that. So I might be mixing them up, but I like Bart's a lot. I think that he's a very fun character. He's very much like an outsider, but at the same time he has a great sense of adventure and personal interest in what he's trying to do. I just found him to be a very I think the true heroes of the story are definitely Lena and Ferris. I think that they are like, it is the princesses coming into their own and kind of like reconciling their pasts as well as healing the world and saving it. And Bart's is just kind of like along for the ride, and it's Bart's hometown that gets thrown into a void. I mean,
so does theirs. Like their tycoon kingdom of Tycoon also gets thrown into the into the void. It was very interesting, kind of like coming to this with largely fresh eyes. And it's also one of those like I've seen. I had seen kind of making the rounds recently, like, you know, everybody's like Final Fantasy rankings and stuff like that, and the Japanese tend to rank Final Fantasy V far higher than it gets ranked in the West, in large part because fewer audiences in the West ever even got around to playing it by the time it made its way out here. And then also, again, just like I said, like the order in which we are introduced and exposed to these things, I think drastically influences like our reception to them. One of the other things I always kind of think about with Final Fantasy VI in particular is there's a very good chance I played that game before I ever saw Star Wars. And like there is such a Star Wars overtone to it that like ideas of like the Empire and the like Rebel Alliance, aka the Returners, are so ingrained in my mind from my love of that game that like when I get exposed to Star Wars, you know, a year or so later, or you know, right around that same time, it's like, oh, like yes, these are great stories, and I like it's getting to find the similarities and the parallels between those. But then it also is that whole, you know, the so much of my knowledge of pop culture things may have started because I saw a gag on The Simpsons first before I ever figured out what they were making the joke about. The like the riff of like, I've probably seen and know most of Citizen Kane because of jokes from The Simpsons, even though I've never watched Citizen Kane. Or like, I mean, The Shining is another great example. Like the way that they abbreviate stuff with like the Treehouse of Horror. I have a skewed perspective on those things because of my touchstones to it. And so I think coming to Final Fantasy V late, and then now again, kind of all these years later.
Well, you played through Final Fantasy II recently as well, then.
Yeah.
So like, even with that, there's such a huge dichotomy with Star Wars between the Empire and like a Rebel Alliance group. You think if you had played Final Fantasy II before you played Final Fantasy VI, if I like the same way you're like the impact of Kefka destroying the world and creating a new world map and everything, would the idea of like the Rebel Alliance and that kind of Empire story be diminished at the same way for you?
I don't think so, because even
Fair
now,
enough.
like Final Fantasy II feels like a small story.
It's very small.
All things considered, because it is so like, okay, you have joined the war against the Emperor. And the game never really goes beyond that.
Nope.
It's just you're just like, you're not saving the world, you're saving your country kind of thing, and the world happens to get, you know, wrapped up in that, but like you're not on a quest to save the world in that game. So it's I don't think it very much falls into kind of the middle of the pack of Final Fantasies for me. I don't dislike it like I do, you know, something like 8, but it is a like it just doesn't reach like the highs of the highs. So it's like I have my tiers of like, these are the, you know, the top, you know, I love these games very much and I, you know, will go to bat and defend any of them kind of thing. Then I have kind of that like middle bucket of like, I played them, I don't hate them, I don't
so where does
think about them.
So 5 lands in that middle ground for you then.
5 lands, I would say actually probably the bottom of the great
nice
category. It's like in the so we talked about it in the 16 spoiler cast kind of thing. Like 6 is my number 1. Like 14 probably comes in here in like number 2 just because it's so goddamn massive and great and like so much there's so much love in 14.
14, here's the thing, 14 probably should 14 just probably should not count, because, and it's why I always say it's like what's your favorite Final Fantasy game? I mean, if it's not 14, then it's like, because 14 literally has 250 plus hours of just core story content.
Yeah.
Not even talking about the breadth of the world and the other additional things you can do into it. I mean, heck, I can just look at it right now. I have it up because I was pulling stuff up. I have over 1,000 hours into Final Fantasy 14.
Yeah.
And that's an insane amount of time to put into any one game, but I have that clocked at 1,055 hours. Like it's no other game can, like no other Final Fantasy game can compete with that.
Yeah.
It's just not fair. I think 11 would be like another one that I think is like, I started playing 11 for the funsies of it, just try to test it out. That game is an old ass MMO.
Yeah.
I don't want to play it.
Yeah.
I've heard great for the people who played it. They say it was amazing.
In and of the time.
Yeah. In and of the time. So for me, that's another one of like 11 and 14, I don't think can really count towards what like the rankings, because we're talking like you can't quantify also you can't quantify the multiplayer aspect of it, of playing with friends. You and I going through stuff and doing it together. We don't get to do that in other
I'm
Final Fantasy games.
Yeah, I mean, the multiplayer aspect is a thing that like drops Final Fantasy 14 for me though, because
Fair.
it's not what I'm looking for in like I and it's like I would probably like it even more now that like you don't have to do multiplayer for so many elements of it, and you can rely on kind of the AI companion stuff.
But yeah.
But yeah, so 6, 4, and then 9 are like my top three, and then 7 is just below that. 7 remake is kind of like also coming in, and like, you know, depending on how the rest of the trilogy kind of plays out, we'll see where that falls. And then I would say like this, like Final Fantasy 5 probably falls in there with like Final Fantasy 10 as kind of like that just next tier down. Still like great games, and like games that I now have either have a like nostalgia and love for, or now have a kind of newfound love for and appreciation of. And then you get into kind of Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3 as kind of like the mixed bag stuff. And then like 12, the 13s, most of 15, or I guess like 15 kind of straddles the like I like parts of it, and then I very much don't like parts of it.
Yeah.
And then 16 also now I guess is in that top tier. So it's like 16, 10, and 5 any given day are probably like fighting for that 5th spot, taking 14 out of the equation, so 6th spot. And then like like 8, 12, the 13 trilogy, I don't like those ones.
I still have not played any of the 13 games. Because I didn't have like a console that was capable of playing them, and then by the time I did, I had like the well had been poisoned enough by other people that I didn't want to approach those games.
Yeah, the like I'll say like 13's combat is pretty fun across the board. I just don't connect or care about the story of any of those games, and it like the story goes so Final Fantasy buck wild across games, where it's like, oh, these are just completely different characters. You just didn't want to have to reuse assets, or you didn't want to have to make new assets for a new game, so you're just stapling this story onto old character models and stuff like that. Yeah,
I have a friend who literally bought a PlayStation 3 to play Final Fantasy 13.
I'm so sorry.
Waited for years, played it, and I was like, this is the one who poisoned the well for me. I was like, so like, how is it? And he looked at me, he said, Cameron, it's a bad game. I was like, okay. He goes, the story's crap.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh. He goes, there's a couple of cool characters, everyone else sucks. The story sucks. Yeah. The world sucks. I was like, okay. And then here's the thing. Then he played 13 2, and he said, I love it. I was like, what do you love about it? He goes, it's basically Pokemon, but with Final Fantasy monsters. I was like, okay, I see the appeal. And then he played 13 3, and I said, so? And he goes, it sucks.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah.
It's so bad. He says, don't. I'm like, man, so after that point, especially, I don't think I'll ever forget Alexa Ray on I think it was back in like Colin and Greg in the Morning or whatever. Like when she co-hosted that. She said, yeah, Final Fantasy 13 3. My roommate saw me in an interview say that I enjoyed the game, and she called me out for it afterwards, saying, you didn't. You hated that game. You were in tears because of how bad it was. And she, like, the trauma of playing through 13 3 was enough. Mm-hmm. I'm like, gosh, I'm never touching those games. And then I've got, like, now we got like 13 apologists out there on Twitter, like talking to you, Cam Hawkins, saying like, it's a great game. And I'm like, I don't know if it is, man. I don't know if it can be at this point. Like, it's such a, like, yeah, it's so maligned. Now I understand your dislike of 12. Like 12 is like a very like 12 is rough in a lot of ways. I like a lot of 12. I think a lot of the characters are fun. The world is interesting enough, but gosh, there are just some really not great things about that moment to moment gameplay in that game.
Yeah, like that one has so much like RNG behind it that I just like in particular I'm thinking of the like I don't remember what it is, but like it's the summon ability kind of thing, or the like your limit breaky kind of
quickenings,
yes, yeah, the quickenings. I don't like those I like there are a lot of things I enjoy about 12, and I picked it up. I picked up the Zodiac Age version twice because I didn't remember that I'd already bought it. Um, uh, so like I like the hunts aspect of that. I like Balthier and Fran. I think they're fun characters. I don't like Vaughn. I don't like Ash. I don't like the judge, other
Bosh.
Bosch. Yeah. I don't like Pinello.
Okay, I like
Um,
Vanilla.
so like yeah, there's just like enough of that core cast that you spend most of that game with, and I'm just like I don't care about most of these characters, and I also didn't like I didn't like the Gambit system
The
that
Gambit
is very
systems I'm
much
not a
like
fan of
okay
either.
like hey you we're doing actiony kind of stuff, so you don't have a party in the way that you're used to having a party of you're picking each of these characters moves, so you can just go ahead and like figure out the rules to like auto run these characters, and it's like and but you have to like unlock a lot of those things over the course of the game. It's like
Yeah.
I don't like that.
No.
um
But I mean, by the end of the game, it's really cool because you've unlocked and combined a lot of stuff. But the
yeah
really, honestly, the really opening half of that game is rough in a lot of ways because people are following rules, but sometimes you get into situations where, oh, the rules I developed aren't working anymore, and now I have to completely revise everything I've been doing so far.
yeah
I'll never forget. I got through a third of that game through just using like just chain spamming quickenings on bosses
hmm
to the point where I entered my first area where I couldn't use that same tactic. And and I didn't realize, but I was so underleveled. And I'm like, I really don't want to go back and grind, but I went back and grinded and I finished the game. And it's such a brutal, like I like the world. I like the world. I like the politics around it. I like the stuff that's going on. I like that your big bad guy in that game is technically trying to do the right thing. But he's going about it in like the most awful way. But it's also because of like
I
he
mean, I
like
don't. I
oh
the story for 12, I couldn't even tell you what it is.
okay
It's so like gone from my brain.
it's very much I here's the thing I that was one of the game's first games where it's like you fight God in a lot of
Yeah.
ways or like you go against the gods and I really dug that at the time and then it like continued to like now it's like almost like every other
Oh yeah, because
RP
that's the Lassie versus no Lassie versus Felsi is
is 13.
13. Yeah,
It's
it's
the
Bartholomew or whatever, right?
uh
No, God, that might also be 13.
No, it is. Oh, gosh, it's like it's the whole like crystals dynasty. Like there's the dynastic blade that cuts the crystals that gives power, and they have like the airships named after all the summons.
Yeah, that was another thing. Like as a especially as a fan of like 4, 6, like I hated that the summons were airships and not summons.
Well,
um,
they give you the
you get stuff through the quickening as
oh no
whatever kind of thing.
the not eidolons but the summons that you get for 12 though I liked a lot the different
I
ones.
didn't, and I think part of it is also you get them so late, or you have to play a huge chunk of that game before you even start unlocking them. Yeah,
You would get like the thing about I like it is that they're direct inverses of the like they're it's all part of the because they're all based off of the demons from or the inverse of the demons from tactics.
yeah.
So that's one of the reasons I like them is because it is a like there is they are the alternative kind of variations of them.
I also, just thinking about 12, I also didn't really like the license board.
Oh, license. Sorry, when you talked about, oh yeah, when you mentioned so the Gambit system, yeah, no, not a fan of that because of the rule stuff. The license board, I hated.
Yeah.
I hated the license board because I'm like, I want somebody to be this person. I want somebody to be this person. I don't like that. Like, oh, cool. I have to unlock like 6 different things to get the next gun license
Yeah.
for this character. Like, I hated
I
that.
can't just have them equip the gun. They have to have the gun and a license for the gun.
Like,
Admittedly, that's that'd be a better system, I think,
in real world,
in
yeah.
the real world, sure. But yeah, like it's more absurd when it's like, oh, a staff, you have to have a certain license for a staff. I also like that game also does some of the like most bullshit like completionist stuff of like, hey, if you want the Zodiac Spear like ultimate
Oh yeah,
weapon,
you have
you
to.
have to
Yeah,
not open 4 random chests in the
yeah,
game that only the guide of the game will tell you which chests they're not to open. So it was basically just a, hey, buy the guide as well.
yeah. That was bullshit. It was a lot of like. There's a lot of
Yeah.
bullshit in that game. That being said, I love Ivalice as a setting. I love the politics of what you have going on there. I loved the like a lot of the stuff going on there, but I do think that game is held back by a lot of like core systems decisions and also some narrative choices, like the fact that they just didn't land on who's going to be your central character.
Yeah. I think
Because
like
they couldn't decide if it was Vaughn, Bosch, or
Ash.
Ash,
Yeah.
and they kind of bounced between the three of them in a very non-committal way.
Yeah.
And it's really annoying.
Yeah. I remember
Although shout out to Revenant Wings, the
DS
the
game.
DS game.
Yeah.
That game is lit. Vaughn's actually a really good character in that game. Vaughn and Penella get the chance to like really develop and shine in that game.
Yeah. Yeah, there's just a lot of like I think also I enjoy 10 for the novelty of it being like the first voice acting game. I also don't think the voice acting in that one is great.
No, it's bad.
And Final Fantasy didn't really get good about the voice acting. And again, this is not voice acting. I always try and stress that really is it's like the direction of those voice performances, at least in the English casts, is like really rough. And the point I always go to is like you took Troy Baker and you made him Snow in the 13 trilogy, and he sounds like he's giving the most bored performance of anything ever. Like it is the least engaged I've ever felt with a Troy Baker character.
Which is fascinating because Troy has gone on the record by saying he really loves Snow.
Yeah, no, I know.
He loved it. He loved performing as Snow. I was like, that's great. I love that you loved it, man, but nobody else did.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot I just don't enjoy. And like finally they got the voice performances and voice directing good with 16. So that was nice. But yeah, going back to Final Fantasy V, I like again going through and doing like the 100%ing and everything, like maxed out all the job classes of all the characters. I like my final like group of characters was basically like fully maxed out mimes where you can basically just like customize whatever abilities they have. And there were also like there were times where it was like, okay, I'm gonna run with my white mage, or no, Ferris was most often I think like a dragoon, but I had her with like the rapid fire ability from the ranger, which basically means like 4 attacks every time. Or I would I'd have her, or I'd do that, or a ninja where she was like dual wielding like katanas or something like that. And
Sick.
so basically like 8 attacks each turn, and just kind of like push square to do like the auto battle stuff and just like sit back and just yeah, some good stuff there. Had a good time with it overall. And yeah, it was a fun kind of revisit / remembering of Final Fantasy V. It's one of those like it probably in my previous rankings was probably like a middle of the pack game. In large part, I think just because of what I was doing and playing around it at the time, and now I just have a much more a much better appreciation for not only what it does even in 2023, but definitely what it had done and what it was doing.
Oh yeah,
back then. Really cool stuff, and again, kind of like I can see the seeds of moments that we would get in 6, 7, 8, 9, kind of moving forward. So yeah, really cool stuff there.
It definitely does a lot of walking so other games in the later in the franchise can run.
Indeed. So Cam, hit me with Commonhood. Tell me about this game.
So this game came out on Game Pass. It is from, let me go ahead and pull it up because I want to make sure I give them a proper shout out because they are like a smaller studio, and I do just want to like kind of like recognize them. It is from Plethora Project. It came out literally like a week ago. It has online co-op.
Came to Xbox a week ago. Came out.
Yeah.
Looks like came out end of November of last year. Originally.
That is correct. Yes.
So it's
So
probably like a Steam game that has made its way now to Xbox.
I think so, yeah. Um, Based off of this, I mean it is an interesting game. It has a very like there's a story mode as well as like a multiplayer mode to kind of like build out your facility. Essentially the story is you are a young woman who has been evicted from her childhood home. Your father died, and you had to essentially sell the house to pay off medical bills and stuff like that. Or sorry, not sell the house, but basically couldn't pay keep the bills up, and then you get evicted. Um,
Fun.
yeah, you that's the
Fun fantasy escapism.
yeah. You end up going to visit the factory where your parents met and where they used to take you to come to work as a kid, and it's been abandoned. There was a sinkhole incident where a few people died, and it's just been abandoned. And you go in there, and you find out that actually there's like a couple of squatters that have started taking up residence there, but not in a like in a much more communal type way than just people like hanging out in there like doing stuff. It's and it kind of kickstarts it off by you have a tent, you set up yourself in there, and you just start putting that place together. And there's a lot of really cool ideas and aspects about the game that make it pretty interesting. I think one of my favorite things about it though is this idea of building out a community. I love the idea of taking a like abandoned factory and like over time like retrofitting that place out to be like a community space where people can live in comfort and safety and just kind of like it's abandoned factory, nobody owns it, so nobody's harming anybody by living there, and you're just kind of like building out that place and making it a sustainable living place, a place of sustainable living. And there's something about that I really dug and enjoyed. The problem with that game though definitely comes down to the technical aspect of it. It is a rough game to play. There's a lot of like visual stuff that makes it difficult to kind of deal with. Part of the problem also is the fact that it's like tailored for a controller with all of its instructions. And so trying to use a mouse and keyboard while doing it, it can get confusing. Because there's no there's no automatic detection. Oh, you're using a mouse and keyboard. Here are the instructions in mouse and keyboard. It's all the instructions are always in on Xbox controller mode, and it's really annoying. There's that. There's also aspects of like bugs and issues happening visually when you're trying to like build stuff and put stuff together. And some very unclear instructions, and like there's just it's a rough go at a very cool concept that I enjoyed. I played it for about an hour. I had a good time with what I was doing, but I could see myself definitely not being interested in the long run on that game. I like like I said, I like the idea, I like the concept and everything, but overall, I just don't think this is a hit for me. I mentioned earlier, I'm looking for something where I'm building. I want a game, and this is kind of what I thought this game was going to be. I thought it was like maybe a post-apocalyptic thing, or like a post rundown capitalism sort of thing where you're building out this facility and like growing a community. And in a way you are doing that, but like it's just not compelling. And there's not enough quality system stuff behind it to kind of make it a fun experience. But it is what it is. I got it on Game Pass. It seems like it's a pretty fun game. But like I just don't see myself going back to it at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's a pretty small team, probably.
Oh, I have no doubt that it is. This screams like indie project. I think that it's really cool. I think that it's a very, like I said, cool idea, cool stuff going on here. I would love to see Plethora Project maybe get another go at like making another game like this. And seeing like what they've learned and how to kind of like build from here going forward. But especially since this came out like end of last year on other places, I don't see that like maybe happening for this.
Mm-hmm.
But I wish them well. I really hope that they continue to like grow as a team and do well. But this Commonhood is not it for me. So,
gotcha. It looks like just looking through like Plethora Project's website and stuff, it looks like they had a Block Hood game that appears to be more like SimCity, like old SimCity style kind of vibes to it. So it seems like this is kind of like taking that in a new direction, taking that idea, that style in a new direction. But I'm sorry, didn't click for you, or didn't scratch that itch that you are looking for. Hope you
Yep,
find something there. Obviously, as we we talked, if you're, if you're looking for those builder or sim vibes, maybe revisiting Friends of Mineral Town will be what scratches that itch for
it's
the time
possible.
being.
Yep, I gotta find what I'm looking for, and it's hard to find something that doesn't exist. It looks like so.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that is going to do it for this episode. A little bit of a shorter one this week, and yet we still managed to go an hour.
I was about to say, I was like, this is like normal before we were doing spoiler casts and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you, Cam, for joining me. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot, 2 B's, 2 T's. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Ladies and gentlemen, this week is the finale of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, my Let's Play series of the first of the Jedi Survivor Fallen Order games. Come check that out. It's a fun finale. It is without a doubt my favorite part of the game. The last few episodes, I not only have I been seeing people like the viewership of them going up, but I think there's a really good vibe going on in these last few episodes that are a lot of fun, and it kind of really puts Cal's story into a great place that it launches into in Jedi Survivor. And honestly, this is what we're coming up to is my favorite section of the entire game. So, go check that out if you are watching this after Wednesday, or if you're before Wednesday, go check it out once it's live. But yeah, it's awesome.
Nice. Yeah, you can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. My Tears of the Kingdom Let's Plays ended last week, so you can go catch kind of the finale for those if you are so inclined. I took out Ganondorf in last Thursday's episode, and we'll see what Tuesday and Thursday bring this week. I have not sat down and recorded anything yet. Cameron tried to record something, and it did not go as planned, so that either needs to be recorded, or we might just not have Tuesday, Thursday episodes this week. We might just be taking a little bit of a break after. I mean, it's been been lots of Elden Ring, lots of Breath of the Wild, lots of Tears of the Kingdom this year. Maybe some time away. Also, on a programming front, there probably will be a couple weeks in early August where we will be dark, as I am going off to Orlando for a work trip, immediately followed by vacation. So there probably won't be much in the way of stuff there first couple weeks of August. So yeah.
Oh, but gearing up for PAX West at the end of August, beginning of September, I'll be there.
There you go. Yeah.
So yeah, that's another fun announcement. I'll be there at PAX West. Just me though.
Yeah. Just
kind of ended up that way. There's some big things happening in the lives of everybody at that nerdy site, and I'm the only one who has the time to go. And so I'm gonna go, and I'm gonna have a great time. If you're there, don't hesitate to say hi. It's always great to find more people who have been listening to our stuff. Yeah, it's always a great time. So if you are going to be at PAX West, if you see me, give me a hey, give me a hi, give me a holler. Would love to meet you, love to talk to you. No meet and greets or anything like that planned or anything like that. It's going to be pretty much focused on, catching up with a lot of people that I haven't seen in like 5 years.
Yeah.
Feels like.
Yeah. Yeah. Hope you have a great time there. You follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site. Last thing I will shout out, we're doing Spider-Man movies over on That D Plus show this month. As we did Spider-Man 1 and 2. We'll be doing the Sam Raimi third Spider-Man this week. So stay tuned for all of that. You can find all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, ring notification bells, all of those fun things. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.